Good
This
morning,
conference
all.
will now be recorded.
Welcome you all to the fifth day of Faculty Development Program on Recent Trends in Photonics. Let us move on to our first session of the day, which will be handled by Dr. Priya Rose. Let me introduce our speaker. Dr. Priya Rose is currently working as Assistant Professor in International School of Photonics, Cochin University of Science and Technology. She has completed her master's degree in photonics from CUSAT and obtained her PhD degree in novel technologies for sensors, imaging and materials from Università di Napoli Federico II, Naples, Italy. After which she joined as a research associate in Light and Matter Physics Group of Raman Research Institute, Bangalore. Her research areas include photonic bandgap materials, metametals, ultrafast laser matter interactions, laser produced plasma, etc. She is currently supervising two PhD students. She is a member of Optical Society of America, USA, and also is a staff advisor ISP OSA student chapter from November 2018 till date. She was the vice president of Naples Students Chapter during the period 2009 to 2010. Now, on behalf of Government Model Engineering College, Kochi, let me invite Dr. Priya Rose to deliver her lecture on photonic band gap materials. Over to you, ma'am.
Hello.
Hello, ma'am.
I think I lose my connection in between. I hope I'm audible.
Yeah, you are audible, ma'am, but we cannot see the shared presentation. Can you please
No,
share that?
I haven't started. I haven't started because I was not sure about the connectivity. So I'll
Okay.
start now. Okay. Okay.
Okay.
Thank you. So I hope my presentation is visible now.
Yes, ma'am, it is visible.
Yeah. Okay. So let's start.
Uh,
Thanks a lot.
can you, excuse me, ma'am, can you please
Yes.
share the slide? Can you put in presentation mode?
It is in the presentation mode. I have started the slide as the slide animation has started actually. Can you not see that?
No, it is visible
Uh,
as the PPT only.
okay, just a second. Just again I'll start it.
Okay.
How about now?
No, now also the same. We are just seeing the slide.
Okay. Okay, fine. Maybe I'll try with my PDF version. I'll just stop this and start that one. Just give me a second.
Okay, ma'am.
Can you see my presentation now?
We can see that, but it is not in the presentation mode.
Okay, when I checked, everything was perfect. I don't know what's going
Can you
on.
press Control and L?
Yeah, now
Yeah.
this is visible to you as.
Yeah, now it is in
Yeah.
the presentation mode, ma'am.
Okay, but I think I'm okay. Fine. Fine. So can I start now?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. Thank you. So first of all, good morning to all, and sorry about the delay caused by the technical issues. And thanks a lot for the organizers for inviting me to this FDP on recent trends in photonics. Okay. So as you can see, I'm going to talk about this particular kind of materials which are known as photonic crystals. And we'll be seeing what photonic crystals are, how can you make them, how can you design them, how can you use them. So this is the plan of the talk. Before going into the presentation, so we all know that mankind is always looking for innovations, and we have always looking for new things and how to make new things and so on. So there is always a quest for making new materials which you can use or which you can use to control the properties of certain things in the way we want. For example, there are naturally occurring materials which offers very interesting properties, but people were always looking to see whether it is possible to engineer materials or make new materials out of the already existing material by somehow changing their properties, so that you can make novel materials which will have properties that you like to have. Okay, so this particular topic of photonic crystals is a step in that direction, where you're inspired by already existing material and try to make novel materials. Okay. Why we want to make new materials is that because if you look into physics, you can have a lot of theories, and you say that under particular situations this particular effect happens. Okay, but when it comes to experimentally realizing, experimentally making a device, you always find issues with finding the right conditions met in terms of materials, in terms of other things. So that is why material research on material sciences is a huge topic of research. If you look into the research
Excuse me,
starting
ma'am.
from beginning. Yes.
There is some echo. We are hearing some voice is echoing.
Okay. Is it better now?
Yeah, now it is okay.
It's better. Okay. So fine. So well. So basically, there are theoretical possibilities are there, but then when you want to go and make things, the question is always about whether you have the right things, the right materials, having the right properties. So that is why you always look for materials which can help you, which can help you in achieving the properties you want. Okay. So if you look into history, for like past century, it was it was dedicated to developing new electronic materials, where people were extensively looking at developing new electronic devices. So for the new electronic devices, you need electronic materials. So you now how the semiconductor industry changed the face of the world as of now. You know that, right? So then, if you look into past few decades, definitely there is an increased interest in finding materials which will help to manipulate photons. As you know, photonics basically deals with the manipulation of photons, just like how we manipulate electrons using electronic materials. Okay? So definitely there are materials which responds to light. You have a lot of different kind of materials. But then again, the question is whether you are able to get all the properties you want. For example, if you have an application in which you want to control the light or you want to confine the light, or you want to guide the light in a particular way, or you want to reflect the light in a particular direction. So the question is whether you can make all these things happen with the already existing material, and is there a possibility of finding new materials or making new materials which will help us to manipulate light in the way we want. Okay, so photonic crystals came as an answer to this quest, and we will now see how things started. Okay, so yeah, this slide I think is a very well-known thing to all of you, if you have at least read something about photonic crystals. So what you see here in the picture here is there are two examples of naturally occurring photonic crystal structures. So the first one is a butterfly, and butterfly wing with very bright colors, and a similar one is a peacock feather. Both of these examples. So of course you will think that, or we will think that these colors come from pigments, because usually if you look into nature, most of the colors that you see in flowers, in plants, or in animals, all of them have certain pigmented pigments behind them. But if you look into these structures particularly, and if you have a very good microscope which helps to focus into this further down, you see that they are actually not pigments, but rather these colors are what are known as structural colors, which means the color comes because of the structure, not because of any particular material in them. Okay, so this is the case for both these structures. You can see that the TEM pictures actually are there down, and you can see that no, they are microstructured. They are microstructured or nanostructured, you can say, and that is why they are getting the color. Okay, so now the question is how this color arises because of the structural property, and whether it is possible to extend these natural things into things which we can make for our own use, because these are naturally occurring. We are not controlling their properties, but the question is whether it is possible to make something similar which we can control, which we have complete control over the properties. Okay, so if you look at the initial theoretical predictions that come in case of photonic crystals. So before going into that, we all know what crystals are. So the crystals are the periodic arrangement of atoms, the normal crystals as we talk, right? So we already studied in our material science how periodic arrangement of atoms give you crystals, and these patterns in which these atoms repeat, it is called a lattice, and the crystal lattice actually present a potential, a periodic potential to the electron propagating through it. And what dictate the property of a crystal is the constituent atoms as well as the geometry of the lattice. Both of these parameters play a role in deciding the property of a crystal. Okay, so here what happens in an electronic crystal, we now call them as electronic crystals because we are going to see another kind of crystals, but these crystals are naturally occurring as we know, and these crystals sorry, just a second. So basically these crystals have some property coming from their structures and some property from their constituent atoms. Okay. So basically what happens is that there is this electron which propagates like a wave, and the certain electrons or the electron wave which are meeting certain criteria will pass through the crystal without getting scattered. And at the same time, depending upon the energy of the electron, you have also some energies which are forbidden. So basically, that is how the concept of band theory comes, and you know how the bands are formed in solids. And basically, there's some certain amount of energy cannot pass through the crystal. So basically, there is a band gap that is possible. So as I told you now, we are looking for materials which can give you similar property for photons. So there are certain similarity and also there are differences between the properties of electrons and photons. So the first, if you look into history, the initial kind of, even though at that time it was not called a photonic crystal or a photonic band gap material, the first initial kind of predictions came from Lord Rayleigh. It was in 1887. During that period, the concept of multi-layer dielectric stacks, or something which known as the Bragg reflector or a quarter wave stack, all these are different names, came into picture, and Lord Rayleigh actually explained the properties of such kind of materials, because it was found that these dielectric stacks, or the material, alternate layers of higher and lower dielectrics, when they are formed, they will reflect, highly reflect certain wavelengths and will not reflect certain other wavelengths. Okay, so this was observed and given an explanation by Lord Rayleigh. But after that, I mean, at that time, nobody called them as a photonic band gap material. But later on, there were two papers which came almost at the same time in 1987, which discussed about the possibility of having a crystal similar to an electronic crystal, which can act for photons. So when we talk about a crystal for photons, okay, so what you mean is a crystal for photons. So as I told you in the beginning, a crystal for electron or a normal atomic crystal poses periodic potential to the electron wave. Okay, so similarly, what is the possibility of offering a periodic potential to the photon? So that is the question that we need to find an answer about. So in the case of photons, what will offer them a similar potential? So we come to the answer that for the photons, it is the dielectric constant is the property which is going to give a periodic potential. Okay, that is the property of the material. The dielectric constant will help you to offer a periodic potential analogous to an electronic crystal. So this was the prediction by John and later on by Yablonovich. So this is how we can picture the analogy between the electronic and photonic crystals. So basically here, if you look, this is the diamond structure, the first one, that is atoms in a diamond structure finally forms a band gap. And similarly, if there are dielectric spheres, you arrange them in such a way that they also form a diamond lattice. It is found that they can, depending upon the dielectric value that you use, they can also give you a photonic band gap. So this is just one example. And so this things actually theoretically started to develop, but coming into experimental realization of making these materials, because electronic crystals are naturally occurring crystals, so you can actually, you already have them. The only thing is that you take them from nature and make it in a way useful to you. But here, there are not many photonic crystals that you can take from nature and work with. So basically, you have to make them. So you have to decide what is the kind of dielectric constant I need and what should be the geometry in which I want to put them. So all these things are going to determine the property of your photonic crystal. Okay, so moving on. So basically, this is the idea of a photonic crystal, which is like you have a periodic arrangement. Instead of atoms, now you have periodic arrangement of dielectric material. So basically, there should be at least two material having two different dielectric constants arranged in a periodic fashion to give you a photonic band gap. So that is the idea. So if you see this picture, you can see I have marked 1D, 2D, and 3D. So in a case of normal crystals, we usually don't talk like that. But if you remember how you develop the theory in solid state physics, first you start with a one-dimensional periodic potential. But the real atoms are all having atoms placed in 3 dimensions. So ultimately, you will have to deal with a 3-dimensional material. But in the case of photonic crystals, you can work with 1D, 2D, and 3D photonic crystals. So what does it mean? This dimensionality is not regarding the material dimensionality, but rather it refers to the Hello, is there a question? Because I hear some sound. Hello. Okay. Can I continue? Yes. Okay. So
Yes, you can continue, ma'am.
okay. So in the case of what does it mean to have a one-dimensional photonic crystal is that when light passes through this crystal in one direction. So if you look at this picture, in the direction perpendicular to the arrangement of the dielectric stacks, if the light is moving, it will feel a periodic potential because the dielectric constant is changing as it goes. So there is a periodic variation. Okay. And if you look at the second picture, marked 2D, you see that the light, if it is propagating in the plane of that crystal, in 2 dimensions, it can feel the change in the dielectric constant. Basically, that is a picture where you have cylinders placed in air, cylinders of dielectric material placed in air. So which means there are 2 dielectric constant, one is that of air, one is that of the cylinder material. And if you look into the third picture, there is this periodicity is there in all the 3 directions. So this is how you differentiate between 1, 2, and 3 dimensional photonic crystals. Okay, so as I mentioned, this is not regarding to the material dimensions, but regarding to how the light feels the periodicity in the material. And so here the question is, what should be the dimensions of these materials? So that is very important actually. We will actually I'll come to the theory of that, but usually you have to make these materials having a dimension compared to the dimension of the wavelength of the radiation that you want to control. So that is one important thing. And if you look into literature, you will see that there was a lot of initial experimental work on photonic crystals, which were done mostly in the longer wavelength range, in microwave and so on. So we will see why the reason for that. Okay, so now, so this is the kind of medium. So let's say this is the kind of media that we want to deal with. How do you determine the properties of the light propagating through this kind of a medium? So basically, if you look into this kind of a medium, it's basically a medium with, complex, you can say that it's a mixed dielectric medium where you have more than one dielectric material in the place, right? So basically light will have to deal with at least two different dielectric material. You can actually develop a theoretical base for a mixed dielectric medium, not considering the periodicity or not considering just two materials. Basically, at the starting, we can do this for a general medium, which is made up of different dielectric materials. Okay, but we will take certain assumptions like the whole material, if you look into, each dielectric region is homogeneous, and we are not dealing with the nonlinearity inside the material, which means the intensity of the light that we are dealing with is quite small, and not really small, but there is no nonlinear effects that we are considering. So in such cases, basically so what does it mean is, if you look into this 1D picture, so the green part there will be homogeneous, the blue part there will be homogeneous. There is no change in the dielectric property within that material, but then there is a change in the dielectric property as you proceed further in the Z direction. That is the meaning of this. So basically we will have to deal with the Maxwell's equation, and these are the Maxwell's equation, as you all know. So I don't have to really explain the Maxwell's equation to you. But the thing we take is, one is that it's a source-free situation where there is no light sources within the thing. So basically J is equal to 0 and rho is equal to 0 can be taken easily. Then basically linear and dispersionless material are present, non-linearities are weak or non-linearities are not present. Then we consider the isotropic materials, which means epsilon and mu, etc., can be taken as scalars. You don't have to consider their components. Then we consider non-magnetic material, mu is equal to 1 is true for optical and infrared regions, and lossless and transparent material. So these are the equations basically you have. Okay. So now, you know how to write down the wave equation. You might have already done that. But most of the time when we deal with a particular electromagnetic problem, most of the time we deal with a case where you just deal with a single material or a material interface. Here, instead, you have to deal with a case where your dielectric constant will be changing as the direction changes, as you move on further in the material. So that is why you write down this equation. Finally, you get this equation that is given in the yellow box. So that is del cross 1 by epsilon del cross H is equal to omega by C the whole square into H. So here you cannot take that epsilon out of your curl because since it is a variable with respect to R, you have to keep it within there. Okay. So this is the equation. Now, if you look closely at this equation, it resembles an equation from quantum mechanics, where if you take this del cross 1 by epsilon del cross as an operator, that operator operating on H gives you an eigenvalue, which is a scalar value, and multiplied by H. So this is very much similar to the eigenvalue equation, very famous eigenvalue equation from quantum mechanics. So this is one approach by which you can calculate the property of the light passing through a mixed dielectric media. So what people do is this: you have to solve this equation within the given problem. So what will be your problem? Your problem is either a one-dimensional or two-dimensional, three-dimensional crystal. So depending upon the dimensionality, the problem is going to be really complex. Okay. So the basic idea is to solve and find how this electric, and once you find out the magnetic field, you can also find out the electric field and the distribution. You find out the electric and magnetic field distribution. And going further, you will also be able to calculate the band gap properties from the same approach. But if you look at how to calculate this, okay, how to calculate this is a tricky affair, because it's not very easy as it may seem like, even though it's a simple equation. When you try to solve this within a complex dielectric medium, usually this problem is very complex one. And as the complexity of the medium increases, you might need computational techniques which are very involved. Like, there are different approaches people use to solve this, and one of the techniques is, for example, there is finite difference time domain techniques, or there is transfer matrix methods, there are finite element methods, there are different methods. Okay, the basic idea is to solve for this and find out the field distribution as a function of space. Fine. Now moving on. So what happens to the field? Now we are considering a particular, as I told you, this general equation belongs to any complex dielectric media, any media which is a combination of lot of dielectric media. Now moving on, we will see what happens to that field when you have a periodicity. So basically, if you have a periodicity in the lattice, or you are going to make light propagate through a periodic lattice, be it 1 or 2, any dimension. This case is 1 dimension, which we will first see. So we can see that, just like the case of your electronic crystal, here the field distribution now can be written as a plane wave which is modulated by the periodic envelope that is similar to the lattice that you are going to have. So this is an assumption that we can easily take. So basically now the whole thing whole equation becomes much simpler to solve, because apart from this, there are other symmetry that also will help you to make your problem simpler. Because the moment you have some kind of symmetry in your structure, you know that the Navier's theorem and all. So whenever you have a symmetry, you can reduce your problem. Because for example, if it is if there is translational symmetry, discrete translational symmetry, then you know that your wave function is going to behave in the same way at different points which are separated by the lattice constant. So this is something we already know. So taking it such kind of similar to Bloch equation, here you have a Bloch-Fourier theorem which tells you that you can express your field as a product of a plane wave multiplied by the periodic envelope similar to the lattice. So when you have a symmetry, that is a translational symmetry, that itself reduces a little bit of complexity of the problem. But still, it's, as I told you, this is not a very easy thing to calculate. Now we'll consider the first case, that is the one-dimensional case. So if you look, this is how a one-dimensional photonic crystal will look like. So basically there are two dielectrics, epsilon 1 and epsilon 2, alternating with certain thickness. So this A is marked, which is the lattice constant. So your H is written like that. And what happens is, just like what you did for your electronic crystal, here again you can consider a 2 pi by a, k plus 2 pi by a will give you the same wave vector, same field distribution. So that is the crux of this. And also your dielectric constant epsilon x will be equal to epsilon x plus a. So these are the two things, and this itself will help you to solve your problem quite easily. Okay, and so the thing is that how the band gap is formed. Again, the approach is very similar to your solid state physics. If you remember the solid state physics approach, this is very similar. You have a brilliance zone, and what happens in a periodic potential, there is a splitting of degenerate states. And here you also have to consider the fact that there is the electromagnetic variational principle, which tells you that this higher frequency modes will concentrate their energies in lower dielectric constants, and lower frequency modes will concentrate their energies in the higher dielectric region. So there is basically, when you have a change in the dielectric constant within the same material, there is a separation of modes that happens, which leads to the formation of the band gap. Okay. It's quite intuitive when it comes to one dimension, but not that easy when you extend things into 2 and 3 dimensions. So the basic idea here is this: solving the Maxwell eigen problem. That is the problem in hand. If you want to see what happens to light which propagates through these crystals. So here you are looking for any kind of symmetries that you apply. For example, if you take a hexagonal lattice, then you know that if you rotate this lattice by certain amount of degrees, then the lattice remains the same. So that is an additional symmetry parameter. So that is rotational symmetry. Then there are lattices where you can have reflection symmetry or the mirror symmetry, or continuous translational symmetry, and so on. So the idea is to consider all the symmetry and find what is known as the irreducible Brillouin zone, beyond which the K is not repeating. So basically, you have to limit the range to an irreducible Brillouin zone. Number of symmetries will help you to have a very small Brillouin zone, actually, irreducible Brillouin zone. So the problem actually becomes simpler. So basic idea is to solve your Maxwell eigen problem under the given condition. So as I told you, these one-dimensional photonic crystals have been explored very early on, even without calling them as one-dimensional photonic crystals or anything. So this example is from any one of your standard optics textbook, where you might have studied about this, or this deals with This deals with the high and lower reflections that can be achieved using alternating layers of high and low index. Okay, so this is a quarter wave stack because if you look at this particular example, this is also similar to the Bragg mirror case. So you basically have an incident light which falls on this stack of dielectric, and we usually use the interference of light to explain the occurrence of high and lower reflectivity. So what happens for the incident light is that it will have multiple reflections and transmissions at the interface. So if you have a condition in which all the reflected light combined, if they have maximum intensity, then you have a maximum reflection. Okay, and the other case is also possible where you have a case where the reflected intensity is minimized. So in that case, you will have something known as anti-reflection coating. So if you look at the anti-reflection coatings of different optical elements, they will all be made of multiple dielectric coatings, be it a lens or be it an optical component, wherever you want a low reflectivity. But see also that this low reflectivity or anti-reflection coatings are usually made for a particular wavelength, because that particular wavelength is going to determine the thickness of these layers. Because we call that as quarter wave stack, because the calculations, by calculations we see that you get a maximum or minimum reflection when the stack is having, each layer in the stack is having lambda by 4n as the thickness, where lambda is the wavelength at which you are expecting a maximum reflection. Okay, so that is why usually you make this kind of dielectric layers, anti-reflection or high reflection coatings. If you look at the dielectric mirrors in our labs, we know that there are dielectric coating on them. They are specially designed to get high reflection at a particular wavelength. Okay, and all other wavelengths are not reflected. So there will be particular one or a range of small wavelengths on which you will get almost 100% or 99% reflection. All other wavelengths are not reflected of such mirrors. So such dielectric mirrors also uses the same principle. Now, as I told you, our aim is to create or design such kind of, if we are interested in designing such kind of one-dimensional photonic crystals, we can do that either by solving, as we saw, the Maxwell's equation in the complex media. But as I told you, that is computationally really an involved problem. But if you are just interested to find out the reflection and transmission property of your material, you can use this particular method known as the transfer matrix method. So what does this method does is this: each one of these layers, as we know, it has a particular thickness and a particular refractive index. So what we have that for each layer, we assign a particular matrix given by this given mj. Okay, and what is mj is there are 4 elements, as you can see. So that is each component in this matrix or element of the matrix is determined by the refractive index and the thickness of that particular layer. Okay, then what do you do is, for each of these layers you write down the matrix, and if such 6 layers are there, you will have 6 such matrices. Finally, you will have to multiply all of them together to get a bigger matrix, from which you can actually calculate the the reflection and transmission coefficient of your system. Okay, so this is something that we are doing. Something that we are doing in our in our group. So for example, I am just showing some initial things that students were doing. So if you see, for example, these simulations were done using the transfer matrix methods. So what they did is take a particular wavelength at which you need a high reflection, and then decide what is the refractive index and what is the thickness that you require to get that result, for example, and then try to see whether this kind of materials with the given refractive index and given refractive index and given thickness, whether that such kind of materials are available from which you can make the same stacks. Okay, so these are two different examples which were done by our group. So these are actually quite simpler because you can implement this algorithm using MATLAB or any other computational tools which are easily available. Okay, so so the one thing I need to mention here is this. So I mentioned in the beginning that when it comes to generating photonic crystals, okay, initial experimental things, everything mostly came in microwave or longer wavelength region. So why this is so is because for that you have to look into our Maxwell's equation that we have just discussed, and we know that the Maxwell's equations are scale invariant, which means that if you change the dimensions, the r by n amount r by s, you basically are going to get a shift, a frequency which is also shrinked. So what does it imply is that if you want to make a material which works in, let's say, microwave region, you will have to find, the thicknesses in one-dimensional crystal, thicknesses which are equivalent to or which are comparable to the wavelength of the microwave. That is easier to do. But when it comes to optical region, so if I want to get, for example, I'm considering an optical region here. So basically, I want to get a high reflection at, let's say, 600 nanometer. And what will be the thickness of the layers here? Because the layers here will have something around 150 nanometers kind of thickness. So you see, the thing is that in order to make a layer of 150 nanometer precisely, it's a difficult task because there are different methods, but all these different methods are either costly or needs very careful optimization. So that is one difficulty when you want to go down in scale. So Maxwell's equations are scalable. There is no fundamental length scale. You can scale down your Maxwell's equation to any range in the electromagnetic spectrum. That is good. But when it comes to the practical implementation, things like making the layers or making the material itself, machining the material itself can pose a problem. So these are another examples where they were trying to design, a dielectric stack having reflection in a larger wavelength regime, like from around, let's say, 450 to 550 more wavelengths covered. So depending upon, as you can see, then as the number of layers increases, you get better results. That is very much expected. And similar other results. So the thing is that this kind of, high reflection coatings are useful. This particularly, they were looking whether it can be useful in, for example, in solar cells applications. So, but of course, this was just a simulation to show that you can achieve high reflections for a given range of wavelength by using particular combination of materials. Okay. Now, that is about the one-dimensional thing. And as you can see, one-dimensional case is easier to deal from the theoretical point of view as well as from an experimental point of view. I didn't mention much about the experiments, but there are methods like spin coating, which are easier, from which you can obtain the layers of desired thickness. And of course, if you have methods like sputtering, it's much easier to get the thickness that you want. Now, moving on to two-dimensional periodicity. As you can see, this is how a lattice look like. Okay, but it's not as simple as this. And how do you make such a lattice practically is a question, because it means that in 2 dimensions you have this discrete translational symmetry. What about the 3rd dimension? The theory assumes that the 3rd dimension is infinitely long. Otherwise, there is discontinuity in that dimension. That is not accommodated. Then it means that you have to have very long pillars placed in air or placed in another dielectric matrix in order to get a proper two-dimensional crystal. So you see, again, making anything like that in an optical range. So for example, here, if you look at this radius of each of these rods, it will be of the order of nanometers. So you have to machine such rods which are having this very small, radius. And also you have to carefully place them within few hundred nanometers again. So these are some issues when it comes to the fabrication. Okay, and they have to be quite long. So if you have dealt with nano fabrication, you know how difficult it is to get a pillar in a nano dimension properly placed without changing the dimension from one pillar to other pillar and so on. But again, theoretical, this is a calculation showing the photonic band gap property of a square lattice. This is a square lattice, and the corresponding irreducible brilliance zone is shown. Moving on, how about obtaining a three-dimensional photonic crystal? So why we are interested in three-dimensional photonic crystal is that depending upon this dimensionality, you are also going to see that the light, okay, light will feel the band gap effect. In a one-dimensional crystal, the band gap effect is only in one dimension. And in two-dimensional crystal, the band gap effect is only in two dimensions. So if you want to make a useful device like a cavity or a waveguide, definitely it is desirable if the band gap effect is felt in all the three dimensions. So that is why people are looking for three-dimensional photonic crystals. But they are extremely difficult to make, and you need very costly equipments like electron beam lithography to accurately make them with complete control. But people also have some way around that, and we actually are trying to do something in similar manner. Otherwise, look at this particular structure. If you look at this particular structure, it has periodicity in three dimensions if you look. But then to make such a structure in nanoscale, it's a very difficult task. Okay, so what is how do you produce the massively how such things are produced? So one such example is by using something known as the self-assembly of colloids. Okay, so this is something we can do, but the thing is that definitely we have a lot of drawbacks here. If you use any of the lithographic scheme, be it an electron lithography, any soft lithographic method, you have much more control on the structure that you are forming. But when you use this self-assembly method, so there are two kind of things you can deal with. One is an opal and inverse opal. So basically, it means there is a colloidal self-assembly. Usually, you use some kind of a polymer with a particular dielectric constant as your starter. Then what you do is that you place it. There are different methods in which they will self-assemble. And this is slightly different from the self-assembled monolayers in molecules, as you might you're familiar with. So this here, you take a colloidal solution of this polymer beads, because and then you place it either vertically or on a slide, then allow it to self-assemble by naturally, and then see what is the property. Okay, but then most of the time what we see is that in the case of a three-dimensional photonic crystal, opening up of a photonic band gap is not that easy, because in the case of a one-dimensional photonic crystal, the moment you are using two different materials, you will start to see a photonic band gap. There will be at least a small photonic band gap there. But when it goes to two-dimensional, there are some restrictions. Only if there are a minimum difference between the two dielectrics involved, only then you will start to see a photonic band gap. And when it goes to three dimension, the restrictions are even more higher, because what you are expecting is a complete three-dimensional photonic band gap, and it is usually seen that you require a very high difference between the two dielectric materials involved. Okay, or another approach is to use or is to make the geometry, as we discussed in the beginning, the geometry is going to dictate the photonic crystal property, the band gap property. For example, if FCC is not giving you a photonic crystal, sometimes another lattice will give you a photonic band gap. Okay, so that is the case. But here, when you form self-assembled colloidal crystal, you don't have much control on the structure or the crystalline lattice it is forming, because it's a very natural thing that you allow it to do. But still, you can do a little bit about that. But there is not much of a bigger control. So what people do is that once you form this colloidal self-assembly, That is itself is a three-dimensional crystal, but most of the time it may not have enough, refractive index contrast, as we call, in order to form the photonic band gap. So what people do is infiltrating keeping this as a matrix, you infiltrate it with a higher refractive index material and then etch out this colloidal polymer material that you had initially deposited. That can be done. There are different methods again. So in such cases, what is formed is known as an inverse opal, and it is found that inverse opals have much, much better band gap properties compared to the other crystals, the opal crystals. So this is the inverse opal band gap from Vlasov et al. So that was an early report that they produced. Now, this is the process of inward blowing. This is the process that we are doing here in our lab. So inward blowing self-assembly, as you can see, you just cast a drop of your colloidal solution onto your substrate, then allow it to form the self-assembled crystal. So this is how it looks like. And sometimes, depending upon how much of the material that you drop, that is the drop volume, and the concentration in which you create this suspension, and the humidity and the temperature, and depending upon a lot of other factors, you get either a very good arrangement or sometimes a totally, very bad ones. So here you see how it looks like when you look at the slide, and if you take a term, a SEM image, how it looks. So these are slightly better by adjusting the drop volume and the weight percentage. So you see that there are a lot of defects. You can see there are voids in them, defects in them, and so on. So this is not the best method, I would say, but still it's one of the easiest method to follow if you want to make a three-dimensional photonic crystal. Now, as I told you, when it comes to optical regions, it's very difficult to create structures as you wish, because machining them is not easy. You need very much a lot of equipments to do that. So some alternate structures are also designed. For example, the first one is known as a periodic dielectric behavior. You see that there is some kind of periodicity present, and at the same time, it's not completely periodic if you look at the other two dimensions. But still, when we solve for the band structure, we see that even this structure is able to give you a photonic band gap. And usually what people do is that use this kind of a structure as a waveguide, and in order to confine light more into the waveguide, you use index guiding on the other dimension, so that there will be some kind of good confinement of light within the waveguide itself. And again, photonic crystal slabs are there, even though they look like the two-dimensional photonic crystals. As I told you, it's not a completely pure theoretical two-dimensional photonic crystal, but rather we can see that even this kind of a structure where there's a dielectric slab onto which you make holes of the given dimension, even this kind of structures, depending upon the dielectric constant, can give you photonic band gap properties. So these kind of structures are especially useful when you consider integrated circuits, because they are easy to be integrated into another optical devices. And you can make them as integrated parts. Now we are going into the next topic, that is about how to make useful devices out of your photonic crystals. So I was telling that we can have this photonic band gap property, which basically means that there will be some selective reflection, selective high reflection at given frequencies. That is the immediate effect of your photonic band gap. The question is there another way in which you can use this effect? And the answer is yes. For example, just like if you have, from the solid state, whenever you have a crystal structure and if there is a defect, you know what happens in the band gap or band diagram. So similar things can be expected in a photonic crystal as well. So I have, so you can see there are different kind of defects that you can see here. For example, the first one, the one marked in yellow color, is a point defect. It's very obvious why is it called a point defect. And what does a point defect do? You see all these blue pillars or blue cylinders, let's say they are all having the same dielectric constant. So basically here you have a two-dimensional lattice which is having a particular dielectric constant placed in air. So air and this particular dielectric is making this crystal. Okay, now suppose that yellow pillar there is either having a radius that is different from the other pillars or a refractive index which is different from the other pillars. Or having a geometry which is different from the other pillars. In any of these cases, you are creating a defect because you are disrupting the translational symmetry of the crystal. And how will the crystal then behave is, most of the time you will see that your band structure is modified according to the defect present. Okay, and we will see that there will be additional states which are formed within the band gap. But the thing is that such additional modes formed within the band gap cannot propagate in the photonic crystal. So basically a point defect, if you create a point defect and if you know which is the mode corresponding to the point defect, and if you couple the light of that particular mode into the point defect, then it cannot propagate through the rest of the crystal because it is forbidden. So basically what we will do is we will just restrict our mode to that point defect. Okay, so that is how you create a cavity out of a photonic crystal, and this cavity made with photonic crystals have a lot of applications. And the next, if you see, look at these red pillars there. There what you have created is what is known as a line defect, where you either change the refractive index or the dimension or the geometry of the pillar there. Again, you're creating the defect, and here it's more like a line defect. So again, what happens is that whatever modes are corresponding to the defect cannot propagate through the crystal. So you can have a kind of propagation only along the defect. And again, there are also surface defects that you can create in a similar manner. So basically, when you have a cavity, you can actually confine light, and confining light has a lot of applications when it comes to making lasers. Whenever you want to increase the interaction between light and matter, you prefer to trap the light for some longer time in a cavity, and any cavity will have a particular decay rate, after which the energy will be decayed down. But there is how long you can keep this light in the cavity will depend upon how strong you produce the band gap effect, how strong your cavity is. So, and this actually there is this cavity quantum electrodynamics, in which a lot of such cavity kind of structures made of photonic crystals are made use of, where you actually can increase the interaction between, for example, if you want to increase the interaction between an atom and this light, then definitely you can place this atom in the cavity where you localize or you confine the light. Okay, so confining light has a lot of applications in many different arenas. And so these are some examples of how a cavity, for example, the picture here shows a vertical cavity surface emitting laser. Basically, there is a cavity in which a confinement happens, and then there's the laser action, drag mirrors, and all they can see there. And similarly, how a mode will look like inside a cavity, that is shown in the figure which is left. You can see there is a red part where your mode is confined. It cannot really propagate into the rest of the crystal. It is confined in there. So this is one of the use of photonic crystals that people are extensively using in many different areas. And then what happens in a line waveguide is that you can use that as a in a line defect is that you can use that as a waveguide. So this is how, for example, the waveguide band diagram looks like. So this linear defect will make a guided mode within the band gap. But the problem, as I told you, is that it cannot propagate into the rest of the crystal. So what happens is that it will just pass through the defect. So what it gives you is a quiet lossless waveguide. Okay, so we already know about waveguides such as optical fibers, where the propagation happens through a higher refractive index material. So see here is that you can actually make a waveguide in which your light passes through air rather than through a material. So the thing is that if you want to, for example, avoid the case where you see material dissipation or other nonlinear effects coming from the material, then this is a good way of doing that, because you can create a waveguide by making use of this property. So these are some other devices that people are making. I don't know if for me the pictures appear a little bit cut, but anyway, it is marked there. So basically there are waveguides, filters and splitters and so on. So these kind of effects combine. So basically here you combine a cavity with a waveguide. These are very much used as resonant filters and waveguide splitters and so on. Now, so these are some of the applications. People are working a lot on this kind of applications, especially in communication and integrated circuits. Now, one application that definitely we are interested in is that is the photonic crystal based sensors. So I have taken just 2 examples. There are a lot of examples, you can find a lot of them. You can make different kind of biological, chemical or physical sensors based on the photonic band gap properties of these materials. For example, in the first one, what happens is that you basically make a colloidal crystal, that is MCC, just a colloidal crystal, onto which once it is formed, it will have a particular reflection spectrum. Okay, you take a particular reflection spectrum. Then what you usually do is whatever you want to sense, if it can make a refractive index change to this given crystal, then you will see that its reflection properties change. So that is what you see in the figure up there. The color actually changes depending upon the concentration of the given material. That is one example where you detect something using photonic crystal. One kind of sensor is that. Then again, there are other sensors like that's the one you see on the right side. It's a pH sensor. Again, the basic idea is always the same. If somehow you can perturb this dielectric constant or the total translational symmetry of this material somehow, then you will see a change in the properties of these kind of reflection properties of this material will be changing. So that can be a very good tool to be used in sensors. And for example, if you are making colloidal crystals, which are as I told you, one of the easiest way, they are extensively used in biological sensing, like a lot of biological sensors can be made by functionalizing the surface so that they can attach to a biological material, and while attaching a biological material, it will change the reflection property. By the change of the color, you can determine whether this particular biological material is present or not. Such kind of studies are also going on. Now, moving on. Oh, I'm sorry, I think in this I missed one slide. Fine. So what I wanted to show you was that one sensor that we designed here for sensing of gas of different refractive index using a one-dimensional photonic crystal. So in a one-dimensional photonic crystal, as I told you, there is this multiple layers that you make. So the idea is this: you make a defect layer within the the one-dimensional photonic crystal structures, and this defect layer will have a defect mode, and then by passing a gas or another material of a varying refractive index, you can actually sense, you can see the change in the defect mode, and you can measure the change of such defect modes or change of this defect mode will tell you how much of the refractive index change is happening. So basic idea here is to have a change in the refractive index or the environmental changes which gives a refractive index or other structural changes of the photonic crystal material, which will give a change in the reflection property and will help us to detect certain materials. Okay, so with that, just a second. I'm coming to a conclusion with that. So basically, I was talking about this artificially engineered. As you can see, these are the materials which we make, not naturally occurring. We have to design them and then make them. We pre-decide what are the properties of these materials that we want. That is why they are called artificially engineered materials. Then we have to engineer them, we have to make them, fabricate them, and then use them in different kind of applications. And thanks a lot for your patient listening. You're welcome to ask questions. Thank you. Thank you once again for the organizers for this session in the FDP. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Now let's move on to the questionnaire session. If you have any doubts, you may ask now by posting them in the chat box.
Hello, actually in my PPT I had one. Hello?
Hello, ma'am.
Hello? Yeah, I just want to tell one more thing. In my PPT, so since it didn't work, actually I missed one or two slides. So just wanted to mention this thing. The information that I have taken from is from the MIT Ab Initio group. I actually had mentioned. So if anybody is having more interest in finding suitable materials to explore this area of research, MIT Ab Initio group is a very good place to start with. So I forgot to mention that. So they provide a lot of material, including a free textbook to start studying this particular topic of research.
Miss, there is one question in the chat box. The question is, which simulation tool is used?
Hi, ma'am. So the thing is that we at present we mostly use MATLAB for the the one-dimensional photonic crystal, the transfer matrix method. It's quite easy to implement in MATLAB, but we have also tried FDTD using some of the available tools. As I mentioned, the MIT Ab Initio group actually provides a free FDTD tool, which you can download and use it for free, but it's not, it's not having a user interface, so you have to use command line. So if you're comfortable with command line, that is a very good tool for using FDTD simulations. For this one-dimensional case, we have used only transfer matrix method in MATLAB. Yeah.
I hope the doubt is clear. There is one more question. May metamaterials be the potential candidates to fabricate photonic band gap crystals?
Okay, so usually we deal with metamaterials are a separate class of materials because, as I mentioned here, the photonic crystals, if you look, the constituent dielectric particles, let's call them like the dielectric things there, which gives you this crystalline property. They have the dimension which is very comparable with the wavelength. But if you look into metamaterial, the meta atoms in a metamaterial is formed, they are having a dimension much smaller to the dimension of the wavelength used. And if you have, I haven't seen such atoms where the metamaterial is used as a material to make photonic crystals, but definitely metamaterials also have a periodic arrangement of meta atoms, and they also create, as of course metamaterials are artificially engineered materials where you engineer the properties according to your wish, but these are two different class of materials usually. And usually for photonic band gap materials, the usual approach is to use a single dielectric placed in air, or single dielectric placed in another dielectric host, and so on.
Okay, I hope the doubt is cleared. There is another question. How is glucose monitoring done using these materials?
Okay. So as I told you, that was not our work. I was just presenting one of the examples like from literature. Anyway, the whole idea is this. Whether it is a glucose or whatever material, the idea is this. You have to first make your photonic crystal respond to this glucose. So here you select materials in such way that when you put glucose onto the material, first, as you saw in the picture, they were forming a colloidal self-assembly of certain polymers, and these polymers, when is exposed to glucose, they will suffer, or they will see a change in their environment, and this environmental change is usually manifested as a change in the dielectric constant around them. So this will change their band gap property. So the color they reflect will also change. So that is how, depending upon the glucose concentration, the reflected color will have a change. So that is how you're going to, quantify the amount of glucose.
Okay, I hope the doubt is clear. So another question is there. And the question is, can an optical resonator be made to resonate in more than one frequency?
Usually that depends on your application, but what it is found that usually you make a resonator, like a point effect will give rise to a mode, usually a single mode most of the time. So most of this cavity application, if you look into, are around a single mode. Definitely by removing instead of dealing with the point defect, you can, I think in one of the examples I saw that there are a cavity which is made up of few rods removed or few holes removed. In such cases, yes, you can expect that it will be resonating to different frequencies, I guess.
I
Maybe
hope
a
the
range of
doubt
frequencies at least.
Okay, ma'am. No, there is no more questions in the chat box. So I think it is time to wind up the session. I take this opportunity to thank Dr. Priya Rose. Thank you, ma'am, for an excellent presentation. I would like to thank you on behalf of the members present here, Model Engineering College organizers, and the members present here. I hope all of you enjoyed the presentation. Thank you so much for your interest and attention. The next
Thank
session.
you all. Thank you once again for the invitation. Thank you once again all the participants too. And thanks for the questions. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. The next session will be at 11:45, and I hope all of you will be joining at the sharp time. Thank you.